Thank you. My name's Jill Howell. I'm the Mid-Coast Project Manager with Downeast Salmon Federation, and I'm going to spend my time talking about Downeast Salmon Federation, how we go about our work to restore and conserve sea-run fish in Maine. So this photo right here, it's a little hard to see, but sort of like in the dead center, right on the shore, is our Pleasant River Hatchery in Columbia Falls. We're a nonprofit organization. We have been operating since 1982 in the Downeast region, focused on Hancock and Washington counties, although recently we have kind of expanded and are working in the mid-coast as well. You can go to the next slide. Chris talked a little bit about diadromous fish, so I won't get too much into this, but there are 12 species in Maine. And although salmon is in our name of the organization, we are concerned about all of the sea-run fish in Maine and work to restore all of them. Next slide. Chris had also talked a lot about kind of how we got into the problem in the first place and the need to restore the sea-run fish here in Maine. And this quote, there's the Ellsworth Dam on the Union River, which is still there, which still doesn't have fish passage. The method of getting fish up and around the dam is truck and trap. This kind of highlights how the thinking has been around just how we value fish. And by we, I mean the white European settlers who came here and did a lot of the dam building and the logging and the polluting that has caused the degradation of the waters and the loss of a lot of the fish species. Next slide. The way that we go about our work is kind of holistic. The problems that got us into losing all of the fish here in Maine and Downeast take sort of like a number of different approaches to try to get them back. So we have a habitat restoration team. We have a land trust. We have 2 conservation hatcheries, one here in this building in East Machias, one in our other building in Columbia Falls. We also do outreach and education about everything. All of our projects, a lot of what we're doing, involvement of the community and sort of having folks understand what we're trying to do and what their concerns might be. We also want to try to incorporate those into our planning. So outreach and education is pretty important. And then we also have components of advocacy, and I'll talk a little bit more about all of those. You can go to the next slide. And then I'll let everybody kind of just read through this, but the model of how we go about restoring is built on an ecosystem and community-based co-management model. So we're thinking about both the health of the ecosystem and also what is best for the community, the economies of Downeast, Maine, the folks who rely on fishing. And we try to sort of incorporate all of this. You can go to the next slide. The building that we're in right now, I feel like is pretty illustrative of how we go about our work. So we're in East Machias, we're adjacent to the river. The bottom left is what it currently looks like today. The bottom right is what it used to be. This was Bangor Hydro's facility associated with the dam. And then this dam, which existed a little bit further upstream, came out in 2000 and was a project that Downeast Salmon Federation led, but there was a number of partners who were a part of this. And Chris had also spoke to this in the last presentation, but we also work in partnership with a lot of other people. Agencies, local, state, federal, tribal, we can't sort of do this alone given the regulatory framework, given just like how big of a scale of projects these are. So the transformation of this river and of this building and of the fish getting back into this stream where they once ran super abundant as a result of us removing the dam demonstrates that kind of what we're doing is working and it can be done. You can go to the next slide. So the hatcheries are one component of how we go about doing all of this. We have two hatcheries here and in Columbia Falls, And the method that we use for our hatcheries is a little bit different than other places. We are using, and then there's a couple main differences, but one of them is that we're using where the salmon will ultimately end up is the river water that we are using to raise them in. So the fish that are raised in this hatchery end up in this river. The fish that are raised in the Pleasant River hatchery end up there. It's a more natural way of raising the fish to adapt them to life when they are back in the river. You can go to the next slide. Our habitat restoration work is pretty expansive, and I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I just wanted to put up a map to show kind of where we are working throughout. And number one is all the way down in Camden, and the blue projects are ongoing. The green ones are complete, and I'm going to speak to a couple of them in more detail, but I just wanted to put up the picture of things that are happening like right now and ongoing. One of our major projects that is coming to fruition this summer is the removal of the Cherryfield Ice Control Dam and replacement with a nature-like fishway. So the left photo is a rendering of what this will ultimately look like, and then on the right is what it currently looks like now. And this will restore fish passage on the Narraguagus River, and again has been done in collaboration with a number of different agencies, local, state, federal, and like the municipality of Cherryfield. DSF is playing sort of a coordinating role here, and it's one that we are often playing, and it just sort of illustrates how it takes so many different folks and agencies and support to make these things happen. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to speak a little bit more to the work that's happening down in the Penobscot Bay watershed, because that's where I'm focusing and what I'm the most familiar with. But there's plenty of restoration work happening in Downeast, and then there's more than we can handle down east, and also there's the rest of the state as well. So we've started taking a look at the Penobscot Bay watershed on the Orland River, the Goose River, the Passagasawakeag Little River, and the Maguntacook down in Camden. You can go to the next slide. While removing dams to fully reconnect a river system is the best for the fish and the health of the river, I said a little bit earlier that we're thinking about both ecosystems and communities, and often the reality is that dams cannot come out. And that's what's happening in Orland. So the town of Orland had voted to keep this dam back in 2016. The middle picture is their fish passage. This dam is at head of tide, and so for a good chunk of the tidal cycle on the low tide, the fish can't reach the fish. They just can't get there. The water is too low. So even though the dam is ultimately going to stay, we are working with the town of Orland and an engineering firm. They're currently doing a feasibility study to come up with an alternative to either rehab or replace the dam and add adequate fish passage so that fish can, in fact, make it up through this. You can go to the next slide. Down in Camden, the Maguntacook River restoration is happening. So last summer, the town of Camden voted to remove the Montgomery Dam, which is down in Camden Harbor. It's this big photo right here. That dam is going to come out. The town approved it, and there's funding in place for that one to come out. Behind the Montgomery Dam, there are 6 other ones. 2 of them are up at Maguntacook Lake, and those will stay, and one a little bit further downstream, the Seabright Dam, that one will also stay. There will be fish passage added to those, but the dams in between, those will also be coming out, and DSF is working right now with the town of Camden and other organizations down in that area working on the next dams upstream. In addition to removing barriers and restoring habitat and reconnecting rivers, another component of DSF's work is protecting land. We are a land trust, an accredited land trust, and we work a little bit differently than maybe traditional land trusts who are preserving large tracts of land, oftentimes for recreation and adding trails. Our land trusts are open to the public, and some of them do have trails as well as like camps that can be rented out. But we really prioritize riparian buffer. We are protecting land to protect water quality. If a river has a healthy buffer alongside of it, that really helps with runoff that would ultimately reach the river and impact water quality. So in total, we have more than 6,500 acres conserved, and 83 miles that are river, stream, or lakeside. A part of everything that we're doing is outreach and education, and this really runs a range of activities. There's a lot of programming with kids to sort of show them fish in the river and get them out to see what it is we're trying to restore, what it is that we're trying to protect. The top photo, this is a part of outreach related to the Cherryfield Dam. There's a lot of community engagement when a project is in the planning phases to get people on board and to sort of have them understand what the changes will be to their backyards. Lots of people are resistant to change, but if they are brought into the process and understand what is going on and actually have their concerns addressed and heard, change can be a little bit less scary. Not always, but sometimes. So the last piece of the work that DSF does is advocacy. We have engaged in a number of different types of specific advocacy campaigns. The biggest ones are obviously related to hydropower dams and the relicensing of those and the addition of fish passages. Some of those campaigns lead to dams coming out. Some of them lead to fish passage getting added. But there have been other ones as well on pesticides, on the endangered species listing related to Atlantic salmon, and then also listing of watersheds for water quality. But the one that we sort of have just undertaken and that is relevant to today is last year our board voted to take a stance against open net aquaculture. Maine is the only state in the United States where open net pen aquaculture happens. And if we're thinking about all of the work that we've done over the past 40 some odd years to try to restore and conserve wild salmon, net pen aquaculture is a direct threat to the health of our wild salmon. And so to not speak out against that was sort of doing a disservice to all of the other projects and all of the other work that we are doing and have been doing. The major threat from open net pen aquaculture out in the Gulf of Maine, you can see the photos here. There's a threat of disease from having all of these fish in pens that are in the ocean that are separated essentially by mesh cages from the rest of the ecosystem. Those are not barriers to disease. Those are not barriers to parasites. The nutrient pollution in one concentrated area impacts the ecosystem all around it. And then when I was talking about the hatcheries and how we go about our work to raise fish in hatcheries, we're not only using water specific to the rivers where the fish are ultimately going to end up, but like there are specific genetic strains that are from each river. And so when there are open pens of genetically modified fish that have the threat of escape and can be mixing potentially with these with the genetics of wild salmon that we've done like a lot of care and work to preserve, that's something that's really harmful. So that is one of our newest things. We're glad to be here today with other folks who also understand the importance of preserving wild salmon and the harm that can come from open net pen aquaculture. So I will take questions. I think I'm like ahead of time. So maybe we're back on schedule.
Any questions? Shaba.
I'd just like to comment on the land trust. A lot of the spots that we preserve aren't just valuable salmon habitat. They're old fishing spots, the traditional put-ins, traditional places that people have used for generations. And we want to keep that available to the local people. So that's one of our priorities are doing that. We don't want to post our land if possible. We don't want to take traditional sports away from that. So we try to work with the communities to make it available to everybody. So we go beyond just preserving valuable habitat.
And thanks for saying that. I didn't say this in my introduction about DSF, but our history as a federation, we were formed by a number of salmon clubs. So it was local anglers that started this organization. Folks who started this organization used to fish for salmon in these rivers. So the preserving of the spots is sort of in line with why we started in the first place. Thanks for bringing that up.
I'm going to actually repeat your question afterwards, so go ahead and ask it now.
Could you say a little bit more about the history of the net pen aquaculture happening on the coast of Maine and like the extent of it and the threat of it, you know, how much we want to expand it?
Yeah. So the question was generally about net pen aquaculture in Maine, the history of it, if there is plans for expansion. In terms of net pen aquaculture, I am not the expert, but there are, I believe, speakers who will be able to speak to it better after me. I'm not sure about expansion, but I know that it's Cook Aquaculture who is here in Maine, and they have been here for quite some time. But I honestly will let others who I think the focus of the next presentation or two will hit on some of this.
Great, I'm going to go right here and then...
Is there any indication of how severely the genetic threat has infiltrated the wild population? I know there had been instances where farm salmon have escaped into the marine environment and maybe interbred with the wild stuff. What's the extent of the damage so far? Any studies on that?
I'm not sure about the studies that have been done. Again, I think that there are some folks following up on me who will be able to speak to that more. And I'm not sure about Maine, but there was cases in Washington State which caused them to ultimately get rid of their net pen farming where there was terrible escapes and a real concern. And so when we are thinking about net pen aquaculture, because one of the things considered is, can net pen just be managed better or more sustainably, or is there a way to do it? And we think the answer is no, that some of the examples that I've seen from out on the West Coast that caused Washington to change their regulations were whole-scale catastrophic. Then the whole operation collapsed. And that's worst-case scenario, and that could happen with storms and things. But on the regular operation, we can't assure that there are not escapes, and it's not as though Cook Aquaculture is tracking their fish to ensure that they have the same number that are in there as when they are harvesting.
Great. Thank you so much, Dill. We're going to hop on to the next one, but I'll have you want to ask really quickly while we get transitions here. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I think that this is a very difficult question to respond because I want to link the previous speaker with what you say. How much investment has been done for conservation, and how this investment can be ruined by industrial aquaculture. I don't know if you have numbers in terms of the investment for conservation and how much a setback will cost.
Yeah, I don't, that's a really good question. I don't have numbers about investment in terms of conservation. But I mentioned the Orland Dam, and I'm going to talk about that for a second because I think it really highlights how, like, yes, this is a threat, and while I can't point right now to data about like how many fish are escaping and how much that may or may not have impacted the genetic stock, but we and agencies and tribes are doing so much work to restore salmon that one sort of bad event can like really set us back immensely. In Orland, that project is being funded because of a mercury spill on the Penobscot River that happened back in the 70s. And that mercury spill, 30 or 40 miles upstream, 40, 50 years ago, there is still mercury down the entire river, down into the bay. It has come up down the Penobscot River into the bay and back up the Orland River. And that project in Orland to rebuild the dam is actually blocking the mercury from going upstream. So that project is being funded by this enormous pollution issue that happened decades and decades ago. And the remediation that's happening on the Penobscot River is pretty piecemeal and is not going to completely fix the problem. So when we're thinking about preventing a problem rather than trying to address it afterwards, it's a lot easier and cheaper to prevent than to address later. Thank you, everybody.